pledge of allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Maureen. And at this time, we'll ask the town clerk to swear in our new member, Ed Duggan.
Raise your right hand and repeat after me. I do solemnly swear and affirm that I will faithfully and impartially discharge and perform all the duties incumbent on me as selected, according to the best of my abilities and understanding, agreeably to the rules and regulations of the Constitution and the laws of this Commonwealth. So help me God. Congratulations.
Thank you. And welcome, Matt, to the team, if you will.
Thank you.
Glad to have you here with us. And Selectman Trask, congratulations on getting re-elected.
Thank you.
And at this time, can we have an approval of the minutes of April 20th?
I move we accept the minutes as presented.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, none. Thank you. At this time, we let anybody with new public business that's not on the agenda to come forwards or up to the mic and speak. Is there anyone with any new public business? No? Hearing none, we'll go right on to number 4. The board is in receipt of an application by Ryan P. Crowley, 14 Beaver Park, Danvers, for reappointment as a civil constable in the town of Danvers. Is Mr. Crowley here? Please go up to the podium.
Hello. Well, I'm Ryan Crow. I've been a constable in Danvers for 12 years now, and I'm just here tonight to get reappointed.
Speak a little more into the microphone, please.
I'm Ryan Crow, and I'm just here to be reappointed for Danvers for a constable. I've been a constable here for 12 years now, and just looking to keep on doing it.
Okay, very good. We'll start with questions from David.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. No questions. Thank you.
Gardner?
No, I reviewed the packet, and my presumption, I see that we have letters of reference from the member of the police department, so I'm presuming all those T's are crossed and I's dotted, so I'm comfortable. Thank you.
Thank you. Maureen, questions?
I reviewed the packet also. Thank you, Ryan. You're more than qualified. Thank you.
And Matt?
And I as well have read the character references and the other material attached to the application, and I'm in favor of this renewal.
Okay. What's the will of the board?
Mr. Chairman, I move we accept the application of Ryan B. Crow as presented.
Is there a second?
Second.
Maureen, thank you. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? None. Thank you. Congratulations. Thank you for coming tonight.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
The board will vote to accept the gift of a bench in accordance with Mass General Laws, Chapter 44, Section 53A. Mr. Town Manager.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You received a printout tonight of the application from Chris Sanborn, our Director of Natural Resources. This is a gift from resident Laura McDonald in memory of her father, Sean McDonald, for acceptance by the board tonight, and the requested location for the bench is John George Park.
Is anyone here to speak to it? No one. I guess questions to the town manager, if there are any. Maureen?
No questions.
Matt?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. So on the application, it seems to mention 2 benches, but I think one says library lawn and the other one says John George Park. So is it just one bench
Typically, we ask applicants to offer an alternate location in case the first location is not available. So the library would be the alternate, but I have no indication from Chris that this won't be placed at John George Park.
Okay, and then, do we know what the bench will be made of, the materials?
I believe the standard is metal and like a Trex
Like a
decking type,
composite?
but I'm not 100% certain.
Okay, it sounds great.
David
No questions, thank you.
Gardner?
No, no questions, thank you.
Thank you. What's the will of the board? Oh, excuse, yeah, the bench. What's the will of the board?
Mr. Chairman, I move we accept the gift of the bench in accordance with Mass General Laws, Chapter 44, Paragraph 53A, and with a letter of thanks from the chairman.
Is there a second?
Second.
Maureen, any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, none. Thank you, that's been accepted, and the letter will go out, Mr. Town Manager?
Yes, it will.
A public hearing will be held under Chapter 138 of the General Laws on the application of Major Liquors, Inc., DBA Cappy's Fine Wine and Spirits, 158 Andover Street, Stuart Paul, manager, for a transfer of stock, change of officers, directors, and change of manager of an all-alcoholic retail package store license at that location. Town clerk, is everything in order?
It is.
We have all the paperwork?
We do.
And isn't somebody here to speak to this? Please go to the podium, introduce yourself, and explain what it is you want to do. And I'll assume you're the attorney?
Good evening,
Speak into the microphone,
Okay.
please.
good evening, I'm Attorney Trish Farnsworth, and with me is Joe Selby, and Stuart is the manager. We're here, as you know, Cappy's is a multi-generational, it started in 1940, has a stellar reputation, and this here is just a transfer from one generation to the next. Joe's father currently owns it, is transferring it to his son, so along with the change of stockholder will be change of officer and director. And then Mr. Paul, who's been a longtime employee, many, many, many years, like many employees at Cappy's, he will be the manager on the license.
Thank you. David, any questions?
No, thank you.
Matt?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. A couple of questions through you, Mr. Chairman. So, Major Liquors, Inc., is their only location at this address? Because I know of other Cappies, like, for example, there's one up the road on 114 in Peabody across from the North Shore Mall. So is this change specific to this location, and how is the corporation set up?
This change is specific to this location. I apologize if you can't hear me through the mask. My brother, Steve, owns our store in Peabody. I own, assuming this change of license goes through, 4 package stores in the Commonwealth, one in East Boston, one in Malden, one in Norwell, and potentially this location in Danvers. But all of our locations are separate corporations, and they're all independently owned and operated under the Cappy's name.
Okay, great. Thank you for that information. And then just one other question pertaining to the personnel. So Mr. Paul will be the manager of record on the license, and he will be on site for, I think it says 40 hours a week?
Yes. At least.
Okay. And then what role will Mr. Joseph Shelby, will he also be on site? What's his role?
This is Mr. Selby.
Yeah, I understand that, but in terms of, will he also be on site, or is it just the manager that?
I am on site typically at least once per week. I work out of a location in Everett where we own a wholesale importing distribution company as well. Typically, my Thursday, Friday, and Saturday daily routine includes visits to my stores, including the store in Danvers. And my intention is to be here at least one day per week on location. Typically, I'm here more often than that.
Okay, that's great. Thank you. I'm all set, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Gardner?
Yes, thank you. So, Mr. Paul, can you give us a little bit of your background? I see you're tip certified. The date on the certificate is a couple of weeks ago. So I'm wondering what your history as being tip certified and what your background is in liquor, in being a manager of a liquor license.
Well, I've been,
You'll have to talk into the mic.
sorry. I've been with the Cappy's chain for about, 35 years. I've been running that store since 1988. I've had a lot of people working for me, and we've been pretty close with the town for a lot of years.
Okay. And I presume this is just the recent date isn't your, were you tip certified before this?
Yes.
Okay. All right. And given that you'll be there, I see on the application 40-plus hours.
Yep.
When you're not there, have you named someone as the second for, our intent is that at any time that the store is open, there should be someone who's tip certified who'll be responsible.
Yeah, I have another manager that works 46 hours a week also.
Okay, and they're going to be on, they're going to be recorded
Yeah, if
with
I'm
the
not
town?
on site, he's on site.
Okay, and they're recorded with the town as well?
Yes.
All right, those are my questions. Thank you.
Thank you. This is a public hearing. Anyone in the audience have any questions?
Mr. Chairman, I move we close the public...
No,
oh, I'm
somebody
sorry.
has his hand up.
Sorry.
Bill,
Jump the gun.
these new selectmen, they're eager.
Yeah, well,
Bill Bradstreet, Town Meeting Member, Precinct 1. Could we have the name of the other or alternate person? I heard him say that he would also be there, but his name was not mentioned. Could we have his name? No, you got to talk another way.
It's Michael LeBlanc.
thank you.
Thank you for that information, but their name is not on the license, is that correct?
Correct.
Thank you.
But I will add that Mr. LeBlanc is an industry veteran, has been employed in various package stores, most recently before us with Total Wine Burlington. He's an industry veteran and is tip certified and is prepared to handle all the responsibilities when Mr. Paul's not on site.
Great, thank you.
Thank you for that information. Any other public questions? Hearing none.
I move we close public hearing.
Is there a second?
Second.
Discussion? Hearing none. All in favor?
Aye.
What's the will of the board?
I'll vote to accept the, what is it, Mr. Stephen, is it?
Just read the agenda item.
The Cappy's Fine Wine.
No.
Which one do I?
This is the agenda.
Oh, okay. Oh, okay. Sorry about that. Thank you.
Motion to
So,
accept.
Motion to accept, under Chapter 138 of the General Laws, on the application of Major Liquors, Inc., DBA Cappy's Fine Wine and Spirits, 158 Andover Street, Stuart Paul, manager, for transfer of stock, change of officers/directors, and change of manager of an all-alcoholic retail package store license at that location.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Who was that? David, thank you. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor? Aye. Opposed, none. Thank you. Congratulations. Thank you for coming tonight before us.
Thank you folks very much.
Hi, Kathy.
The board will review and discuss materials related to a possible select board code of conduct. And as a, for information, you got a packet containing materials from the March webinar that I attended about the code of conduct and selecting a chairman for the board. Steve was gracious enough to go through the material that I forwarded to draft a new code of conduct for discussion. We won't adopt anything tonight, it's just a discussion. These materials were related to a meeting that we had planned to have on April 30th, but it never got posted. Selectman Trask was concerned that we should be discussing this material with the new members of the board, and given that I didn't have the 100% commitment from other participants, we canceled that so we could discuss this materials tonight. And I would just like to get a sense of, did anybody review that March 12th replay webinar?
I did not get an opportunity, no.
I have not had the opportunity yet.
Okay.
Not yet.
Did anyone read the Beacon, April 2021, page 12, that referenced the webinar?
I did see it in the Beacon.
Anyone else? So, just briefly, some of the highlights of the Beacon. Talked about officials seeking as much community support as possible, being consistent, which is critical to people's perception of fairness, how to run a meeting, and this meeting was presented by Jeff Nutting, a veteran of local government and a past MMA president. And he spent a lot of time not only on code of conduct, but he suggested that boards and committees hold an annual goal-setting meeting and carefully select their chairs. Some of the ways of doing that is to give each member a turn. May seem fair, he said, but it fails to consider the skill set needed for the role of a chair, a position that comes with little or no training. Not everyone has the conflict management skills. This article in the Beacon doesn't talk about or refer to the length of time he spent on how to choose a chairman, besides rotating, having a discussion, and he suggested it be a transparent process. And he was concerned that many communities, the practice is to pick the chair by means of behind-the-scenes maneuvering. He suggested that's not transparent and could be in violation of the open meeting law. So I just wanted to have that on our agenda on the 30th. That 30th agenda was to have discussion on respect amongst members, use of social media communications, the role of the chair and expectation, and how do we want to choose the chair going forwards? Cycle through the board or a transparent discussion of the best to lead and run the meetings? Through the Gardener's request, we did not have that meeting, so that's tonight was meant to be a discussion point, not to make any votes, but to discuss the policy and kind of get a sense of how we as a board moving forwards want to select our chairs. So if anybody, I don't know if anybody read the material, Matt just probably received it yesterday. So if anybody read the material and has any comments, I'd entertain those comments now.
Well, Mr. Chairman, obviously, I was one of the people who worked on the subcommittee to adopt the changes to the current code of conduct. Selectman Lucy and I worked on that together and presented to the board, and it was approved on August 7th, 2018, and adopted then. Actually, this must have happened afterwards because we did one previous to that. He wasn't on the board then. I see the draft the town manager did on your behalf, kind of picking the information from the other, other select board examples, and I'm okay with most of the language. I guess I want some clarity on Section 1, community responsibility, item B. Recognize, so community responsibility, this is written that, from the code of conduct to set forth standards that we, selectmen, will adhere to, agree and adhere to. Recognize that the function of this policy making, recognize their function is policymaking, not administrative or executive. We have executive and administrative purview over the town manager. So I want to make sure, I would never call a DPW director and say you should pave this road next versus that road. I get that. But I think we need a little bit more clarity on other than as identified in the town charter. Would be one comment.
What section was that, Gardner?
I'm sorry, section 1.
Yep,
Item B.
thank you. Okay.
Yep. The other is section 2, responsible to the town administration. Also item B, recognize and support the administrative chain of command, avoid interfering in administrative process, and refuse to act on complaints as individuals outside of the administration. I consider an important part of my role is to hear, accept, and pass forward complaints. You're right, again, I'm picking on the DPW. I'd never call a DPW director and say, hey, you started too early, I did whatever it is. I would always work through the chain of command of the town manager, but I'm not going to refuse to act on complaints. So I think that just needs to be tweaked a little bit.
I agree there, because we all get calls for different items,
Yep.
areas of concerns, and it's our responsibility to pass it on to the manager through the chair and let the manager or the appropriate party respond,
Right.
without a doubt.
So I just think I need, it just, and this isn't to say it's wrong, I just think it needs some
Yeah.
tweaking.
Yep, thank you.
And then, and in this, I want to make sure that there's nothing, it's not stated, but I want to make sure there's no expectation that if I have a question, that I'm not compelled to go through the town manager to get those answers. If I have a question about, and I do this regularly, but CC the town manager so he knows if I have a question about the river committee, or if I have a question about something that's cropping up, and it's a mechanical question, not a administrative directive. I'll call and ask questions. How many liquor licenses do we have, so that we can discuss, and who are they, so that we can discuss whether we're going to forego those licenses. Things of that nature. It doesn't preclude it here, but I want the latitude to be able to ask questions. I think it's respectful to say we should CC the town manager, but I don't feel we should go to the town manager and have it then farmed out.
And I think in some of the materials that you received, it talks about the roles of the members and being appointed to different committees.
Yep.
And if they're a liaison or an appointment to a committee, then those discussions are certainly permissible.
Yep.
Questions asked, comments made. And I would hope that every committee that we are appointed to somehow comes to us on a yearly basis with an update on what they're doing. And that's something that this last year with COVID, we weren't able to do.
Yep.
But I hope that in the future, we can get the different committees that we're liaison to that are important, there's stuff going on, that we do get a report. I'm still waiting for a report on the electric company that I asked for almost 2 years ago.
Well, there's a good example. I'm not on the electric, I'm not a liaison to the electric company, but there are times when someone's asking about rates and what's the comparative rates in the region, where I know they have that information. I should be able to go to the electric division manager and say, hey, by the way, do you have that someplace? Is it on the website? Did I miss it? Whatever it is, I want the latitude, even outside of my relationship to a committee, to ask those factual questions.
That's a good point to put in there somehow, so that's understood.
Okay. And then finally, the last thing was on the back of the page, enforcement of code of conduct. We should make reference pursuant to open meeting laws, Mass Open Meeting Laws, GL 30A, section 18 through 25. It does speak to managing the meeting as the chairman, and the rules governing open meeting and any digression from that.
Thank you, yep.
So those are my comments based on the draft. I mean, there are other points in the other examples that seemed great, and whether we want to pull them out and put them forward. This draft, however, didn't speak to your discussion about the duties of the selectmen in choosing a selectman. So I think we need another section.
Yes, agreed.
Okay, those are my comments.
Great, thank you. David, any comments?
I think it's a very important undertaking. I'm comfortable with Gardner's comments. I think it is important that we eventually and soon adopt a code. I have read all the materials that were sent out to us this week. I think it's really well-done stuff, but I don't have any particular line-by-line recommendation tonight, but I will try to make sure that if I'm going to have any, I will have those prior to the time we're called upon to vote something.
Thank you. Maureen?
I agree also with your comments, Dan, and Gardner's, and also Dave's. I like the draft. I think if we can tweak it a little bit and put what we're talking about, into it, and have another draft, and then be able to look at it another time too, and add more comments to it.
Thank you. Ed, did you have any comments to make?
Oh, yes, thank you, Mr. Manager. So I think you can boil this down to the golden rule. So I look at it from a different perspective, and more as from an implementation point of view. When I was on a committee back in 2018 and I received the document, there wasn't, we received the document, but there was never any real discussion about it. So the implementation, I think, is key. I've worked for a number of corporations that actually have ethics officers, and employees are required on an annual basis to take both ethics courses, which are kind of a broad-based approach, as well as code of conducts, which are more focused on actual behavior.
So to that point, if I may interrupt, Matt, the town clerk will be sending you information, or Ann, on taking your ethics training on the state website.
Right, and I
You'll need
recall...
a certificate to turn in that needs to be on file for
Right.
2 years, so I'm sure at some point they'll get you on that.
Yeah, I recall taking that course last May. I was wondering if there's a difference between a code of conduct for town employees and for town boards, and if there is, why would we make that complicated? Why shouldn't we have be they volunteers or employees, all adhere to the same set of standards? It's important that the town's reputation is based on the actions and integrity of both groups.
I'll ask the manager to correct me if I'm wrong, but perhaps the union contracts may have some
All right.
influence on that?
I mean, I would say that may be a small part of it, but employees are subject to the same ethics law that the board is in terms of being treated as a municipal official or employee. We do have a set of core values that the employees have developed for themselves, and state law is very explicit and prescriptive in terms of employee conduct. I think this policy is quite different given the unique nature of the select board in its policymaking role and interactions with themselves, the organization, and the community.
So just one last thing, just to reiterate about the sort of the implementation. The various committees and boards, they should be, it should be almost like an agenda item at some point, and have someone come in, sort of like a ethics officer or a specialist who can actually provide a presentation and ensure that there's no confusion about what a document like this represents and the importance to adhere to it. Because if we have volunteers that don't follow these different bullet points, then they really should not be sitting on these committees. They don't represent the best of what we expect for the town. So That's all I have at the moment.
Thank you. So we read it, we'll discuss it at some point in time during the year. The manager and the chair can determine when to bring it back for a vote to adopt. I know the manager is thinking of a select board retreat in the near future if he wants, if the decision is made to discuss it then so be it. But I think, Steve, if you have the notes from tonight, maybe work on a little bit more, and when we have a document that's ready for a public discussion and vote, I think that would be appropriate. Any other members have any other comments on that regard? No. We do have a current code of conduct that we can work with, but I think that this is a little more comprehensive, and based on that webinar, it makes sense to make some policy changes as to an annual meeting to select the board chair and to review these codes, because like anything, it's a living document that can be tweaked and changed as time goes on.
And Mr. Chairman, if I might comment?
Yes.
When we do this, I'd like it written in a manner that phrases it as, we the selectmen these are our proposals and this is what we will be doing. It's to Mr. Duggan's comments, we are actually not hired by the town. We aren't, we're not employees. We get a stipend, and that may put us in a different umbrella, but we're the top tier and subject to a higher standard. And so I think that, to Mr. Duggan's point, if we look at what the employees have to adhere to, and I'd be interested in seeing it. I've heard discussions about social media interactions and things of that nature that I'm not privy to, but if there is guidelines or guidance that we give to our employees and to the volunteers who serve on boards and commissions, I'd certainly like to just see them. But I think that we, this is our document and should be written as we are. This is what we're agreeing to. This is what we're saying our code of conduct is.
Okay, good. Steve?
A couple of points. First, I will say, I think Select Board Member Duggan raises a great point. We do distribute the code of conduct policy each year to the boards and committees, but I took down the idea of making it an agenda item and having the staff liaisons to those committees. We can meet at the staff level, and then they can lead that discussion with the boards and committees. I think taking questions and having a discussion is an excellent idea for those groups. And we did, I can recirculate, but we did distribute the town social media policy. I think when when Dan first shared this material, I may have shared that social media policy, but I can recirculate that if folks would like to see the social media policy the town employees are expected to follow. I could do that very easily.
Yes, please.
Anything else? Well, the other issue was holding an annual meeting to select a chair. And I just want to know if anyone would make any comments for the record on that subject.
So my suggestion is that we should, so there's been historic precedent, there's been, that's sometimes followed, sometimes not, sometimes changed for good reasons. In times of crisis, it'll be hard to come up with a formula because the board, 20 or 40% of the board changes every year. I think that we can have what you said is a thoughtful discussion about people who have the skill set. Some people may not want to be chair, but we should also clearly delineate what the responsibilities of chair are. We kind of know it inherently for those of us who've been on the board for a while, but it's not just facilitating these meetings. It's the point person acting on behalf of the board in between meetings, in discussions with the town manager, in being notified of certain issues, and we should delineate, we should clearly identify when the chair should then expand that information. So if something comes up in the middle of, in between meetings, especially during the summer, there are times when it warrants either talking to the other, informing the other selectmen, not for decision making, but informing us that these things are happening, or that, calling a meeting when it's warranted. I've long asked both town managers I've worked with that if it's going to be in the papers, let me know if you know ahead of time. I just want to know what someone may react to in the Salem News that I didn't know is a hot issue. Just so I can do a little homework, be a little prepared in case I get questions from people. And I think that identifying the roles and responsibility of the chair, and in that section, identifying how we select the chair as best we can, would be prudent. I think they go hand in hand.
So my agenda for the April 30th meeting that we didn't have had number 3, the chair, the role of the chair and expectations. How do we want to choose the chair, and policy on how to hold public hearings. So I was fully ready to discuss those issues as a group. So now we'll have to
I
wait.
think the work group, I think the work group idea is good, and one of the things that we should clearly identify, not only in our meetings, but maybe post somewhere, is people get confused about what is open meeting, what is public meeting, when can they speak at a meeting or an agenda item, when can we have subcommittees that are not public meetings, executive session, and why we have it and what we can do, so that, again, to the point of transparency, if we say we're going to an executive session, we disclaim why we're doing it, which is very limited reasons, but we tell people why we're doing it. I think publicize when you can go to an executive session, publicize the open meeting law, when they have the right to talk, when, for example, the open meeting law says everything comes through the chair. No matter who it is at the meeting, the chair recognizes people, they talk, and the chair has powers to in that regard. I think if we publicize it, it just helps with the transparency you're looking for.
Well, sure. The document that spells out public hearing, public meeting, et cetera, the role of the chair, et cetera. Those are all good points. And most of them are in that material that you got somewheres.
Yeah, and they were.
Yep. So I think that's another good point. So more good stuff to work on. Anyone else have any comments?
I like Gardner's ideas, Dan, especially being, fairly new, having it all transparent,
Yep.
Have it all laid out. Like you said, your April 3rd, we were going to do that, we didn't have it. And can I ask a question, like, when you're the current chair now, for us to re-elect you again, or elect somebody else, when does that happen?
Thank you. I think, based upon, and you and Matt weren't with us when we discussed the term of the chair at a previous board meeting, and it was decided amongst us that the chair would stay in the position till after town meeting.
Oh, okay.
So the meeting after town meeting, which is, what month are we in? May 20th.
Okay.
We will have the opportunity to re-elect or elect a new chair. So that's something that previous years prior to that discussion, it would have been done at tonight's meeting.
Okay.
But the feeling was that a new chair, the feeling was that the current chair should take the budget to town meeting and continue to finish it up.
And if the current chair wants to chair again, he makes that.
Well, that's up to the board to
To the
make
board,
that
okay.
decision. I mean, in transparency, that will be up to the board members to make that decision.
Good information, thank you.
Okay, you're welcome. Thanks for bringing that up. I was going to do that at new public business, I also. Thank you. Matt, any questions, comments?
Just in the past, I've seen the transfer of chairs become sort of an awkward exercise, so I would hope that whatever method we use kind of was, the optics of it were a positive event and not something that kind of got out of hand. So that's just based on previous observations.
Thank you. Anything else? There's no other comments, we'll move on. Everybody all set? We'll come back to this subject in the near future, Mr. Manager.
Sounds good.
All right, thank you. Town manager will report to the board on various items of interest.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Two things. First, fairly quick, you received a copy tonight, prepared by Ann in my office, of an updated calendar for the year. We had agreed to move the second June meeting from the 15th to the 24th. We'd arranged that, discussed it at the last meeting, but this puts us in a good position. We normally do not meet in July, as is reflected on this calendar, so that actually shortens the time between meetings by having that second June meeting toward the end of the month. And Ann prepared these today, and I wanted to distribute these, A, so that people had them, and B, in case there was anything on here that people know at this point will present challenges or issues throughout the rest of the year.
Okay. Looks good, thank you.
Okay, second, as we speak, the Health Board is meeting, and I wanted to provide this board with a brief update on the reopening work that's been taking place. Our new health director, Ade Salaran, has now been with us for a little over a month. We presented him on his first day with 2 inches worth of policies and procedures and safety protocols that have been in place since last spring. This is not new to him. He has been dealing with the same issues in his old role in Somerville, so he's very familiar with the broad circumstances, but needed to get up to speed on where we have been, where we are, and where we think we're headed. So Ade has been working closely with Lee Farakna in our buildings department, Anthony Calcebetta, who is our safety and risk manager for the town, Jen Breaker in my office, and various department heads from the library, senior center, staff in town hall. And we are looking at, obviously, increasing vaccination rates. That's information we've been putting on the town website. We've been updating that on Fridays along with our case counts from the state, so there'll be a fresh update tomorrow. As of April 29th, we were at about 45% of residents in Danvers had received a full vaccination dose, 2 doses. 16% have received a single dose, which would include a small portion of the Johnson & Johnson single shots. And the active case count is now below 3%, which is good. And a lot of the questions we've gotten are, when are we going to be back to normal? And the point that Ade has made to me, and I think he said it better than many I've heard, is that we're working our way to new normal, which is not going to be old normal. Even when things are fully reopened, we probably will still have masks with us. That is not old normal. That is where we are right now and where we need to be to maintain the safety of ourselves and those around us. 75% is a magic number that we've heard a lot in the media and in the newspapers in terms of vaccination rates being the point where you will reach herd immunity, and I'm using air quotes because I think there are open questions as to whether we as a nation will even get that to the 75% mark. So that's a long way of saying folks want information. They want to know what's going on, and that makes all the sense in the world. We don't have a specific answer for folks to say that on this date certain we're going to be in that new normal. The analogy that we were discussing earlier today, it's a little like we have a camera lens. We can see very clearly out 10 feet. We cannot see very clearly out 50 feet. So in terms of specific information, what I wanted to share tonight, which is what Ade is discussing with the health board, is that in the next couple of weeks, the library will be moving into their next phase. I believe either on the 10th or the 17th, and part of that will be up to the trustees working with the acting director. The Gordon room will be open. People will be able to come in. They're going to have the new collection set up down there. Folks can come in, check in with staff, use that collection. They'll be making appointments for use with laptops. In the little bit longer term, they want to start doing appointments in the children's room for families who want to bring their kids back in. We used to spend a lot of time playing in the pit. I know from other parents they're excited to get back into that space. The fuzzier answer is that at some point this summer, based on the trends we're looking at, we expect to be fully open again. Whether that's June 1st, June 15th, July 1st is going to depend entirely on the trends that we're discussing continuing to be heading in the right direction. Town Hall is another question that we've gotten. By the end of this month, we will be taking foot traffic in without appointments. We'll still take appointments. People have always made appointments to come to Town Hall, but we're finalizing a staffing model where people can come in through the front door without an appointment. We'll have a person set up in the foyer to facilitate and direct traffic. We'll still be under occupancy limits in that space, But a concern that a number of people raised is the inconvenience of having to make an appointment. The truth is we haven't received a lot of complaints about that in the building. There's been chatter on Facebook about that, but we hear it and we want to make sure that we're moving forward. So by the end of this month, we expect that to be in place. I'm also very excited to announce that by mid-May, and I think May 17th is the date that the senior center is looking at, they're also talking about a limited reopening there, probably low capacity to start. But again, we're approaching 50% vaccination in the community. We're below 3% for cases. You know, the health and safety team is ready to take that next step. And you know, again, I can't state with certainty 2 months from now where we're going to be, but everything's trending in the right direction. I think we're able to start taking those steps that people are excited for. We also, probably beginning of the week, will start adding some reopening language to the COVID page of the town website. So we've been keeping a lot of the data fresh on there, but even if we can't offer specific information, we should be able to offer some more general information in terms of where things stand. So what is specific can be reported out. What is still being monitored, we can be more transparent about that as well. So folks want to know. We know that in the absence of communication, people come up with their own communication, so we need to be doing a better job of putting some of that out there proactively. We've also, internally, we've surveyed staff because part of what we're also wanting to make sure is that we, as the summer comes around, we have a vaccination strategy in place for staff. I'm very pleased to report, as of today, we surveyed staff last week. We've had 150 responses, and the vaccination rate among town staff is north of 80%. A big part of that is going to be public safety, who had access to vaccines back in January. But the staff is vaccinated, trending at about twice the community. And so we are also, and you may have seen in the news, the Safe Summer initiative that has been spearheaded by the Metropolitan Area Planning Commission, with Salem and Lynn and Danvers and all of the towns on the North Shore, trying to make sure that we're communicating with our residents across the region consistently as we head into the summer months about the importance of getting those vaccination numbers higher, because the more that we head in that direction, the more things will again start to get back to the normal that people want to get back to. The recreation program was released last week. Some of you may have seen that. So David and Nick and their staff are trying to offer as normal of a summer as possible with Little Lizards and the Falcons program and Let's Play Sports and the like. So that's out there. They're still working to see if they can add programming based on available staff. There's a staff shortage in most places. So I think that's the gist of what I wanted to cover.
Can I ask a specific question, Steve?
Let me share one more point, and then,
Yep.
and I think the approach we have not adopted, which a lot of places have adopted, and I think just last week the Mass Board of Library Commissioners chose August 1st as their back to normal date. A lot of towns and cities 3 months ago said July 1st is going to be the back to normal date, and we've intentionally not arbitrarily chosen a date. Instead, we've continued to watch the case counts each week. Because if we're ready before August 1st, we think it makes sense to be moving before August 1st. So, I guess that was the last point I wanted to make. And sorry, go ahead, Dan.
No, I'm sorry. Just specifically, can the Friends of the Danvers Council of Aging meet in person for the annual meeting on May 19th in the Senior Center? Can you check with your...
I can check, and I think that the answer, I would say that similar to the discretion we've given to other boards and committees since the holidays, really, virtual versus in-person meetings is really up to the group. As long as we're satisfying the occupancy limits of the space that we're using, I think that's fine. I can check and make sure that I'll get you a specific answer.
Yeah, there's 15 board members.
And if that space isn't
staff.
sufficient, we obviously can use spaces like this for meetings as well. I'll get you a specific
I'd
answer.
like an answer for
Yep.
that specifically, please. Thank you. The meeting's at 4 o'clock. on
What was the date,
19th.
Dan?
19th, May 19th. And to your early point, we will never see a return to what normal was a year and a half ago. When I came back from a cruise on March 8th, everything just shut down right after that. And it's been a whole new world. COVID is going to be with us forever. the nation, I'm understanding, 30% of the people won't get a vaccination. One of my granddaughters doesn't want to get a vaccination. She's 20-something. That is going to be a major problem in some areas if we can't get people vaccinated. But there will be no turning around, unfortunately. So we're just going to make the best of what we have.
And they filled it online.
What's that?
You can fill it online.
Fill my mic?
Couldn't get a last time.
So my comment is, keep working on this. Any questions for the manager?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. Understanding that, you know, people want to get back, and obviously they make anecdotal comparisons. This community does this, that community does this library does such and such. When you talk to the library trustees, I'm wondering, I heard you talk about potentially scheduled use of certain, you know, the computers or the children's room. Is there an opportunity to have scheduled browsing? Pick a time, 45 minutes, X number of people can go in and browse the catalogs. People will be, you know, it'll be limited in number, and people will be expected to remain socially distanced. If you're in one aisle, you know, you would expect to, as adults, to maintain that relationship. Is that an opportunity? I'd like to suggest you recommend that as part of your discussions. The other is,
Can I just, for point of clarification, so you're talking about in the library proper as opposed to the Gordon room where the new collections are being brought, or the ability, which hasn't changed, to do checkouts from the...
If I want to browse the music catalog, I want certain records or CDs, that's a browsing experience. It's not necessarily, I know I want to get that CD. I'm going to browse it, and oh, this looks interesting, or that book, and the same thing with books. I may go by and look at an author and say, oh, that looks interesting, or see something right near what I'm looking for as a subject matter, and pull something off the shelf that I hadn't anticipated doing. So I'd just like to ask that we consider that. There are cleaning techniques at night that they could handle. So I'd suggest that might be one opportunity. The other is, excuse me, obviously people want to get to town hall, and I've been one of the stalwart responders about the fact that by appointment or by email, people have been served throughout this. But I do hear a little bit of frustration, whether it's real or, again, anecdotal, about receiving calls back, or I've called town hall. I've been in the game 20 years. I know what department to go to. Many people may not. I have a question about X or Y or Z. You're discussing putting a point person back at the desk at some point. Can we get even now someone who actually answers the phone and redirects based on the initial call? Someone says, I have to pay my excess tax. Someone may say, I have to get this permit, and they don't know whether it's the building permit or the water department. I'm just wondering if we have an opportunity to put someone actually live on the end of the phone during business hours.
I think that, yeah, so the answer is yes. I mean, we're now within 2 weeks of putting that person back at that space with the phone, but I think in the interim, you're not the first person to raise that point. We've tried to reiterate to staff, although the building is locked, and services are being provided, a phone call that isn't returned is the fastest way to get complaints. I mean, everybody understands that. So I think it's two things. It's having that main line directed to somebody, and it's reiterating the need to be prompt in responding to these phone calls, which we've worked on and will continue to work on. And as I said, we're now within 2 weeks of having that staffing model in place to address that. But starting tomorrow, yes, we can look into that and make sure that we're revisiting that.
Thank you.
What's that?
Yes, thank you.
Anything else, Mr. Manager?
That's it, thank you.
You all set?
I mean, I would defer to the town clerk unless you plan to do that under old business. We had an event in town this week that she may wish to discuss.
Well, we can discuss that now. Please tell us the good news.
Well, I don't want to steal the town clerk's thunder. I would defer to the town clerk.
Well, we had our election on Tuesday. I did not order the rain that came, but even with the rain, we had a 13% turnout, which was very well represented. Usually
I
it's,
think the best I can remember is a 12% somewhere back in my memory, so
well, it's usually at 8 to 9%.
generally speaking.
Is
yes.
generally what we have. I don't know if I have some, I might have some numbers in here, but
No, it's
my
okay.
hand's right
Just
on
the
them.
13 is,
But no, it went really well. We utilized some of the poll workers who opted to come back. We sent them a letter prior to the election, and if they were comfortable enough to come back, most of them had had their vaccine. We also worked with the high school to utilize some high school students for community service, which worked out well. I think we had, it was like 238 hours of community service for the high school students. So the students liked working with the poll workers, and the poll workers liked working with the students. So it was a great day. Went well.
well
Thank you.
done. Thank you. Anything else, Mr. Manager?
I think that's it. We have, we had some new faces elected to the town meeting. So the town moderator will be conducting a town meeting school. I know the town clerk had been in touch with the moderator. I don't have the latest breaking news whether we're going to be doing it in person or remotely, but we'll be getting those folks ready for the town meeting that's coming up in a couple weeks. So that's all that I have. Thank you.
Good, thank you. Do we have a motion on the consent calendar?
So moved?
Is there a second?
Second.
Discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. So as we go to new business, previous new business, I'd like to bring up some new business to the board. Back in, I believe, March, we had the Utilities Director, Public Works Director, talk about the new program where they were putting a customer charge on the bill. The board at that time had a consensus that we would ask him to go back to the Municipal Light Board to review that new policy and reconsider it. Now, we can't tell the Light Board what to do, but I was disappointed in watching the meeting on the 4th at 8:30 that the Light Board was told they're not obligated to respond to our request. And in fact, the chairman did admit that they would have discussion at their June meeting, but unlikely they will make any change or review it. He then went on to say that we can expect a significant, and he repeated it, significant increase later in the year. My first issue is, granted, there's no obligation, but I would think they would have taken our request a little more seriously, as it was made on behalf of the ratepayers, the community at large. And I would also suggest that under our current code of conduct, there was disregard for items 9, 10, and 12 by the chair on making those comments at a public meeting. My thought is, we can direct the manager. And I'd like to know if this board would like to have on the agenda next meeting a discussion of this customer charge and give some direction to the manager. We can't overrule the Light Board, but I think we can ask the manager to pass on our concerns. And the concerns are a small commercial bill with this new charge. 25% of the charge, 25% of the bill is the charge. That's also true on the small residential bills. And I believe the comment was made that if your usage was over 1,200 kilowatts a month, that you'd see a decrease in your bill. So I went back and looked at my bills for the last 2 years, and I'll use myself as an example because you don't know who else bills I can look at. In 2 years' time, I only had 3 months where I exceeded 1,200 kilowatts. And I run a hot tub year-round. We have a freezer. And only 3 months did I exceed. And those were the month of August, September, based upon air conditioning use. So I'm not going to see any reduction in my bill based upon what I was told. I would like to know how many residential customers actually have an average over 1,200 kilowatt hours a year. I don't think there's many. So I'm asking the board for consensus to put on the agenda for next month a discussion on these items with a goal of giving the manager some direction.
Are you recommending that the municipal light board director or someone who represents the municipal light board come and explain and demonstrate? I understand the concept of electric it has to consider the infrastructure. That is, if you're a solar user, regardless of the fact that you're a solar user and may draw down not the average from the town, no matter what happens, we have to run a wire to your house, and every pole in between is part of that infrastructure. So I get that part of that it's shifting some of the responsibility to make it more of a, here's what you pay just to have the ability to have the service, and here above that is what you pay for what you consume above that. But I think there's the two things that I was dismayed at is how it was communicated, how it was presented. It was a $7.50 charge on people's bills that really didn't get a strong communication ahead of time so people understood why they're seeing $7.50 and then their rate. I often say that 90% of the issues aren't the what, it's the how it was communicated or lack of communication. The other is the concept that people at a certain threshold won't see an increase or will see a decrease. I'd like to see how that applies. They have the bills for the past year for residents. You can say 40% of the residents are using this amount and they're not going to see an increase, or they're going to see X increase, or whatever it is, with empirical data, not anecdotal data. So I'd encourage that. So if you're asking to have an agenda item where we ask people from the light board to come to us, great. If it's just a discussion between us, I think it's harder because we don't have that data to base our discussion on. Was your intent to have a representative come?
My intent was to ask the board what they wanted to do. I wanted a consensus.
I would be more than willing to suggest we have the municipal light board come back with some more data about what they're doing, and I take umbrage at the fact that they don't have to respond to the selectmen. They feel they don't have to respond to the selectmen. I don't think that's appropriate.
And I'd say I'm not going to say I take umbrage with it, but I was surprised to hear the reaction. But again, they should abide by the code of conduct as well.
I agree.
Okay.
So I'd be supportive of that.
Thank you. So, David, any comments?
It sounds, if we have room, I think it sounds like a good idea to have them come in for a brief discussion.
Yeah, it's because they meet again early in June, so we can't put it off to June. Maureen?
I agree too. Communication's the key.
Matt?
I agree. I find it disconcerting that they're planning to do an additional significant increase to the service charge. Again, we're looking for transparency. Perhaps if they had explained the increase back in January, maybe people would have been more receptive or more agreeable to it. But even today, people don't really understand what the intent was. The town is trying to promote conservation. We offer rebates for appliances, and yet this is counterintuitive. So I would like to see the board here. I think it would be good to have the public actually hear firsthand what their justification is.
Oh, definitely. The ratepayers should be aware what's going to happen with their bills. It's a new policy. I would have thought they'd let it work through for a year before they started looking at a significant increase. But the intent is to raise it again before the year is out.
What are they saying, Dan, with the significant increase? We don't know.
The word significant is.
Yeah, big, right.
Big word.
So,
So,
yeah, but like when?
at the end of the year.
The end of this year?
Yeah. The other thing I found interesting, listening to that meeting, a number of years ago, they upped the rate that they were taking from the ratepayers for paying for capital projects from 3% to 5%, which is certainly within the legal limits. But that increase was done for 6 months to raise $8 million to buy the smart meters that don't work. So again, the ratepayers footed the bill for those smart meters that failed. So I think there's a lot of questions that we can ask the Light Board. And again, the manager can just determine what be on the agenda and how it will be on there, but I just want to be able to ask the questions and give the manager some direction. Everybody else set with that? Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, may I, just for clarification, it's not, my suggestion would be, it's not clear to me that, I need some direction, but my recommendation would be that we invite the utility director, the business manager, and the chair to the next meeting to have a discussion. The business manager is retiring at the end of May. So if, with your permission, I would like to talk to David Lane tomorrow and see if they're available on the 20th to come and to start that discussion.
Right, unless they're willing to put off their discussion till
Sure.
later after June. If that's the case, then we can
Just one, and
rush. I hate to rush and
Yep.
make mistakes.
so yeah.
I
and
would ask you, with permission of the board, to see if they're willing to put off their discussion to a later time to give us time in June to hear from them, especially after Peter retires. So,
And it may be, I haven't seen the meeting from the 4th, but I do not believe that there would be action to change the rate to change the charge on the, it sounds like they were going to discuss the matter on the.
request,
Right.
but make no changes.
Correct.
And significant increase to come before the year is out. So check with the folks what makes sense. If they're willing to put off that discussion to a later date, then we can put off our invitation to a later date.
Okay.
So that we're not rushing. And again, I don't want to, poor Peter is last week, he'll be busy celebrating, as he should. So we'll leave that up to you to make those arrangements.
Thank you.
Thank you. So at this time, does anybody else have new business before we go to closing comments?
I just want to, oh no, closing comments.
I have a new business.
New business.
If I may, Mr.
Yes, you
Manager.
may.
This is an item that someone contacted me about yesterday, and this is about a proposed power plant, gas power plant in Peabody on the Danvers line. There's been several articles in the Salem News recently. It's the Water River substation behind the Pulaski Street Industrial Park, next to the old rail line there on the shore of the Waters River. So it's really just within maybe 150 yards of the Danvers town line. And the concern is, once this plant goes online, and to be clear, it's just for intermittent use in times of high demand. But there are Danvers neighbors or residents on South Liberty Street, and also close by over on Water Street and Jacobs Ave and North Shore Ave, which is kind of downwind. I was just curious if Danvers has been engaged in this project, and if there's been any discussions about the type of environmental impact that this plant might have on the residents. I don't need an answer now, but maybe it's for next meeting.
Okay, Steve?
Yep. I believe that'd be through the engineering department, but we can bring an answer or the town engineer to address that. Thanks.
Thank you. If there's no other new business, we'll do closing comments. David?
Can I just mention a couple of events, Dan?
Yes, please.
The Cable Advisory Committee met on April 22nd, and just so the board knows, they're working diligently to get a new Comcast contract for 3 years so that the contracts for Verizon and Comcast will be on the same track. And just to say that it seems to be very much under control, and the town has, the committee has, private counsel very experienced in these negotiations, seems to be going well. The Human Rights and Inclusion Committee met, I think it was April 22nd, and that is a very, very busy committee these days in the last year. Lots happened. High points to me were the update from Eric Crane, who is the school committee's liaison to that committee, and wow, he is on top of what is going on in the high school, in the schools, with respect to matters of human rights and inclusion. And I mentioned it to you, Dan, Chairman Bennett, and he said that we would probably be able to have in June reports from all of the liaisons, and I think that would be really wonderful to have Eric come in on that. What else did, lots of other stuff. There is, in the process, the drafting of a proclamation for Juneteenth, which I don't believe has come to the board yet, but it's coming. And it seems like a very, very laudable thing to do. And then finally, tonight, there was a subcommittee meeting of the Pride Committee of the Inclusion and Human Rights Committee, planning some kind of activity during the month of June, which historically in Danvers, at least for the last 9 years, has kind of focused on the raising of the rainbow flag. But the subcommittee, and it'll be proposed to the whole committee, want to have it a little bit beyond and taking into account probably Juneteenth. And a lot of good stuff is happening, and you'll hear more about it in the next couple of weeks. And that's all I wanted to report. Yeah, the final thing is, just came to my mind as I was looking today in the newspaper, there is a city-wide fiber optic internet network being installed apparently throughout it's going to be servicing the entire city of Salem, which is going to provide a third alternative for internet service within that city, so that, I don't know, I suspect that our cable committee will be looking at that and kind of monitoring it to see if indeed there is going to be something in the future to provide a third competitive internet cable provider in Danvers, so that citizens aren't dependent only upon the choice of Comcast or Verizon, except to also say that the entire industry seems to be in flux, because all kinds of things are happening which frighten Verizon and Comcast and everybody else about what their financial futures are. So at least I think our committee is watching it very carefully, and I just wanted the board to know that. Thank you.
Very much. Gardner?
Yes, first I'd like to thank the people who came out and voted on behalf of all the candidates. It's to put yourself out there, to volunteer, to be a town meeting member, library, selectman, every elected board says a lot, and it means a lot for the candidates themselves to put themselves out there. And I wanted to say I appreciate everybody who ran, those who won, those who did not, and we often hear about, complacency, or we hear complaints about complacency, and often it's the case that it's, the same group of people running, but it's because there aren't people who are coming out to offer their time and efforts and insight. How often do we see town meeting precincts with empty seats, or just with a set number of people running? I welcome the challenge every time I run, and think it's challenges are good. keeps me on my toes, and I just think that we should thank those people willing to volunteer their time for the benefit of the town. I also want to, last meeting we heard from the Making Danvers a Welcoming Community group that has now with their presentation disbanded. They gave us a lot of tools in the toolbox. Some seem to be pretty easy to grasp, others. I'd like to talk about having a future workshop with town administration, with the school committee, with the Human Rights and Inclusion Committee, with DCAT as, you know, as a communication medium, with certain special interest groups within the schools or certain religious and social organizations, and sit down and start walking through those and ask people what they'd be willing to embrace. You know, some fit better with some of those organizations outside of town hall. It may be DCAT, and I'm making this up, but DCAT may...
That is on the agenda for next meeting, to discuss those points that were brought before us and next best steps.
Okay.
That's what we're
I
going to
didn't realize the
decide.
agenda was made.
Well,
And maybe
I
the
mean,
next best step is to have a
We requested
collaborative...
that at the last meeting.
Okay.
To do that on the 20th.
Okay, and maybe the next best step is to have a collaborative meeting with some of the other entities. There is a limit to how much town administration can tackle at any one point themselves. And I think some of these solutions are better suited or easier for other organizations to help manifest. Thank you.
Thank you. Closing comments, Maureen?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to update people that the Smith School project, I walk by that daily, is coming along terrific. It looks, what a fine school. It looks like they're going to be on target for next school year. The construction guys have been doing a terrific job, thank you. It seems that we're on budget. The Danvers Housing Authority, Cindy Dunn continues to monitor the safety for the seniors. They're still getting vaccinated, and she's planning on bringing out some, as the weather gets better, some outdoor furniture, naturally practicing the social distancing. The other thing is that I'd like to say thank you to the town clerk for doing such a good job of organizing, you know, the voting center at the high school, providing safety to the voters and the poll workers. Good job, Kathy. And what else? The rail trail seems to be moving along good. We had the volunteers that did the cleanup. They're always looking for donations, and if anybody would like to make a donation, Larry Perot is the fundraiser. And I wanted to say congratulations to everybody that won, Gardner and Matt. Welcome to the board. And all the town meeting members, school committees, everybody, thank you very much for volunteering your time on behalf of our town. That's it.
Thank you. Matt, closing comments?
Yes, I'd like to echo Selectman Trask's compliments for all the folks that made the effort to go to the polls, as well as the candidates that put themselves out there. We need to remember that democracy requires the participation of the citizens. That's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Manager, when will we get a tour of the Smith School? Will it be after it opens or before?
Nope. Based on our conversation, Dan, I sent a note to David Lane and Joe DeSantis, who is our project manager, and they were comparing notes and looking at dates. So soon. The answer is soon.
Soon, good. Thank you.
We're going to try to make sure that when we invite the various committees, that we have a few items for the school building committee to take action on the day that we're there. So it's in the works.
Great, thank you. New business, when we talked about the pop-up park on Maple Street, I was aware we had a grant, but I didn't know we had to match the grant through fundraising. I don't know how I missed that piece. But there is a fundraising effort being put on by Mass Development for our purpose to raise $8,000 for matching grant. And if you go to patronicity.com/Danvers, that's patronicity.com/Danvers, you can make a contribution to that pop-up park. To date, they've raised $2,370 from some 35 people. They need $8,000. It's by the end of the month. Whatever we raise, they match. We won't get the full $8,000 if we don't raise the $8,000. That I didn't know either. So the community, if you're interested in that pop-up park, and there seems to be a lot of interest in it, please support it with a donation of some funds. With that, is there any other business to come before the board? So I'd like to remember the veterans, and this meeting is adjourned. Good night, Danvers.